Welcome to a special edition of the Athletic NBA Daily. I'm S. Baraheni, joined by my guy, Bryce Simon, co-host of the Pistons Pulse. You might know him as Motor City Hoops on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Also co-host of the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini. Look, Bryce, I don't know about you. A lot of people are going to be focused on the playoff race, the race to the top, as some might say. But me, as a person who covers the Toronto Raptors, I'm focused on the race towards the bottom, the cellar dwellers race. That's what I am focused on, which is the tank race. And since you do such a great job of covering the NBA draft, I figured we'd have you on to talk about the draft and everything that's happening. March Madness is around the corner. Obviously, you know, everybody's going to be focused on some of the stars that might be in that tournament. But I wanted to start it off with the guy that everybody is talking about, which is Cooper Flagg. And I think general consensus coming into this year was that he was the number one guy. And I would imagine so far the consensus is that he's still the number one guy. But he kind of scared a lot of people recently when he said that, man, maybe there's a chance I could stay and keep playing college. And, you know, I kind of like this. This isn't a bad deal. How do you feel about his comments about potentially staying an extra year in college?
Yeah, first off, this is my 5th year doing Pistons work, and this is the first year I am not part of the tank race conversation.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that you want to talk NBA draft and brought me on, because the Pistons Pulse will not be talking NBA draft, maybe some second round prospects, as it looks like their pick will convey. Yeah, so this is interesting. I'll be honest with you, S. I don't know how much credence I've given it. Like, I'm like, there's no way he's really going to turn down being the number one pick. Listen, if that's what he wants to do, like if he loves college, he loves being the guy at Duke and all of that, you know, my immediate thought was money. And I wonder if I almost think Duke could match what his first year salary would be in the NBA. Do you think, I wonder if they couldn't. That's
like $11.5 million.
Yeah. So I wonder now the long-term risk of that is like, come on, please don't do this, Cooper, because listen, yes, he could get hurt playing either place next year, but one place would be 1 year at 11 million if they were able to go get that amount. Yeah. And in the NBA, it would be 4 years, you know, whatever.
Guaranteed money.
Guaranteed money. And so I'm just like, money wise, please don't do this. Even though like I am a little bit of like the old school, would love to see guys love college basketball, stay in college basketball, all of that. Yeah. I just don't see any way that it makes sense. And like he's consensus number one right now.
I would be surprised too. And also,
do you think they could go get the money? That's what I would be most interested.
If there is a program that could, right? That's probably them.
That would be my thought as well. Like this isn't a high school recruit. This is a kid averaging 20 a game now. Could you go get him? Like we know schools can raise 7 figures, right? We've seen it for guys that aren't even close to as good as Cooper Flagg. That aren't living up to those numbers, and not the same exposure and the same name and any of that stuff. We're talking 5 times though. That's at least 6 times almost. I would be fascinated to see if he said like, hey, you know, Shire, I'll stay, but you got to match what my rookie year money is in NIL. I think you're right.
I think this is a conversation, though. I think the fact that NIL has made this an actual conversation where it's like, could he possibly stay? Is there the potential for him to do that? That's the interesting part moving forward with the draft. And it's like, from what I've heard, the 2026 draft is incredible, especially at the top 2. So he has to consider, all right, would I even go number 1 in that draft compared to some of the other guys? Okay, so sticking with 2025. Like I mentioned, Cooper came into the year as the number one guy. You mentioned some of his numbers off the top, but is he still in that tier of his own? Has he created a tier by himself where he's just chilling there as the number one guy?
It's a great question. We'll talk about some of the other guys as we go throughout. I think coming into the year, I actually had Ace Bailey in a similar tier with Cooper because I think Ace is a like NBA prototypical idea of a wing, right? Like what you're looking for. We'll talk about Ace later. As it turned out to start the year when Cooper was struggling a little bit offensively, and that's where the questions were, it was actually Dylan Harper who was hooping at Rutgers, Ace Bailey's teammate. And I think there was a point there where Cooper never left number one on my board, but it was actually Dylan that May was in the same tier as him. And for me, tier means, okay, if me and you are in the same tier S and a team is drafting, I would understand if they took me over you, if my skill set made more sense than your skill set made.
Yep.
Right now, Cooper Flagg should be the number one pick for all 30 teams in the NBA. There's no question in my mind. He's in his own tier on my board, number one pick. And it doesn't matter who's picking. Now, are there teams that maybe he fits the roster better and all of that? Sure. Yeah. But what he's done offensively is what has risen him to that clear-cut tier of his own number one pick.
Yeah, you mentioned the offensive side because I think that was the big question mark coming into this year, where it's like, how much potential does he have on the offensive end as a scorer and a shot creator? Can he create his own shot? And I think more recently you've seen him be able to do that. Like, the crazy athleticism is just on another level for him. And I guess for people who might not be as well versed in Cooper Flagg and the NBA draft, like, what is the number one overall pick? Whatever team the number one pick gets, like, what are they getting in a player like Cooper Flagg?
Yeah, so I still want to start with the defense and the impact he can make on that end of the floor. I think Cooper Flagg is, if you want to assign a position, like, to me, he's like he's like a natural 4 that can play some 3, right? Like he has some versatility there. I don't know that he's like your all NBA level point of attack defender. Like, I don't know that he's that, but he has this big time athleticism, off ball rotator, low man. Like, we always talk about those low man rotation rim protection guys, right? Yeah. I think that is Cooper Flagg. I've watched him do it in high school. For those that don't know, he played at that awesome Montverde team last season that had, if you follow the draft, Derek Queen, Liam McNeely, these other guys that are all big time players as well, Asa Newell, all of those guys are potential lottery picks in their own right. And that's part of why the offensive question marks were there, was he played on this insanely talented offensive team. Here's what's impressive about Cooper. I really look at conference play numbers, because when you get it, I think a player can surprise people the first 10 games of the season. You can come into a college season and scouting reports not as out. You haven't had time. You get into conference play, everybody's a known quantity. I think the rotations ratchet up. He's averaging 22 a game on 54, 47, 85, almost 7 free throw attempts, over 4 assists. I was looking at the synergy numbers. I don't always go to the numbers, but like catch and shoot, he's at 39%, whether it's guarded or unguarded. On dribble threes, he's at, those numbers, right at 40%. Dribble jumpers, he's 8 of 20. So he's doing a little bit off the bounce. Right. It's just like a lot of those offensive questions.
Package, it seems,
And here's the thing that's exciting offensively. I've seen him run the ball screen as the handler. I've seen him run it as a screener. He can pop, he can roll, he can go play in the dunker. He can stand in the corner, knock down a 3. He's a great cutter. And here's the last thing. He plays really hard, and for a superstar, he'll dive on the floor. He'll do all the little things. He'll play his butt. Like, he does all of the intangible things as well.
Yeah, that's what makes him really exciting, is he's willing to do everything else on the floor on top of be this potentially great offensive player. Okay. I want you to make one fan base's day right now. Okay, let's say there's 5 teams right now at the bottom. There's the Wizards, there's the Pelicans, there's the Jazz, the Hornets, and Raptors. Right there, that's the race really towards the bottom. Which one of those teams would you like to see Cooper Flagg on the most? Whether that be fit or whether that be just like that team deserves a player like Cooper Flagg.
Okay, so like I said at the top, I think I want to be clear. He should be the pick for all of these teams, right?
100%, right.
Just because Toronto has B.I. and Scotty Barnes and R.J. Barrett, I don't think if they get the number one pick, they should be like, you know what? We're actually going to take so-and-so. They should. But because of that roster, I'm like, okay, Toronto, don't love it as much.
Okay.
I'm not saying the Wizards shouldn't take him because they have Alex Sarr, but I think that'd be interesting fit. But I'm like, okay, that would be... I think where he really slots in are actually places that have 4 men, but I think is like, hey, you move on from those guys and let Cooper Flagg be the guy. So it's either the Pelicans, and it's like, how funny would that be? Kind of like,
that would be very funny.
You move on from Zion, the most recent big time Duke guy for Cooper Flagg. I'm like, okay, let him and Trey Murphy and Misi and whoever else, let those guys build out this thing. Right. Or in Charlotte, I think him and Brandon Miller complement each other very, very well as like this wing forward combination. I would have said Mark Williams 2 weeks ago, but I don't know what that means for him anymore. And then obviously you have LaMelo Ball there as well. So I think those are the two teams for me that it's like, I would go ahead and move on from Miles Bridges. I'd go ahead and move on from Zion Williamson. I'd let Cooper Flagg come in. Utah would be interesting, but those are the teams that stick out for me, I guess, are those two.
Yeah, the Hornets are interesting because I think adding Cooper would also make it more viable to keep LaMelo just because of the defensive potential of a guy like him on the weak side, roaming around. Like that just enhances you so much defensively that you actually can live with some of the mistakes that LaMelo has on the defensive end, which is kind of an intriguing fit there. Okay, so Charlotte, maybe New Orleans. Those are the teams. Okay, Hornets fans, Pelicans fans, rejoice. Cooper Flagg for those teams. Okay, we'll be back in a sec. We're going to talk about the rest of the draft with Bryce Simon, Motor City Hoops. And we're back. Okay, so Cooper Flagg, done, finished. Very, very great prospect. Can't wait to see him go number one. We'll see how that shakes out over the next couple months, especially with the tournament. I think the tournament will be a very, very interesting part of this whole number one case. Who is in that second tier, though? It's Cooper and then it's everybody else. Who's in that second tier?
It's funny you say that we'll get a chance to watch these guys in the tournament because two of these guys will not be in the tournament most likely, which makes it very, very interesting. I find myself going, I did this last year with who was Colorado. Colorado had Cody Williams, Tristan Da Silva, and KJ Simpson. And throughout the year, they struggled at times. And I'm like, can all three of these guys be first round picks if their team isn't? And so my point is, Rutgers is like right around 500 right now and may have the two best players in the draft after Cooper Flagg. Right. So I will give you my four names in the next tier and then we can go wherever you would like.
And are all these names in the same tier with each other?
Correct. Okay. Yes. So these guys would be, Cooper is the first pick for all 30 teams.
Yeah.
Whoever gets number two, I would draft one of these four guys no matter what, but I would factor in like, oh, we have this roster. We need a ball handler. This guy makes more sense. Or we really need, whatever. So Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper at Rutgers. Okay. Kasparas Yakichonis at Illinois. Okay. And then VJ Edgecombe has moved back into this tier, the wing at Baylor, guard wing, whatever you want to call him at Baylor. So those are the four guys that I have in this next tier. These are the other four guys I'm pretty excited about.
Those are really exciting names. I'm a big Edgecombe guy, especially World Cup and then, Olympic qualifiers. He had some really, really nice flashes where you're like, whoa, this is a guy who's already competing against grown men. Very exciting. Okay. Let's talk Dylan Harper because I feel like he feels like the guy out of that bunch that will likely end up the number 2 overall pick. What is a team getting in a guy like Dylan Harper? And I guess your favorite fit for where he might go.
Yeah, so Harper is like your, on-ball primary creator type of player. He shot the ball better so far this season than what I thought he was going to. Now, if you look at the numbers, you're like 33% from three. That I wasn't expecting a lot. Now, I will say this. He is one where the conference numbers have dropped a little bit. He's down to 30% from three. So it's one of those, I think, at the end of the year, you go back and evaluate and was like, did he just have a hot shooting stretch? Because there were questions around the jumper. He has a nasty in and out hesitation dribble. He has a strong body. He's not super explosive but he gets to the rim. He gets to the paint using this kind of creative but practical handle. And then this really, really nice body control. And then the defense is good. Like that's one thing with this top 5 is there are some, Ace probably has the most defensive questions, maybe Kasparas as well. But as we mentioned with Cooper, defense is going to be a calling card for him. I don't know that it's a calling card for Dylan Harper, but I think Dylan Harper is very good on the defensive end as well. So just kind of your on-ball primary creator, good size, really good size, right? Like he's not like 6 foot or something like that. Defends. Really like, how much do you believe in the jumper with Dylan Harper? I think is what it's going to come down to with teams.
How much of that is combine? Like, do you think teams take into consideration like how well he's going to shoot at the combine when it comes down to it?
It's funny. Here's what makes me feel better about doing NBA draft. I've got to know scouts from different teams over the last couple of years. And like, I'll talk to a scout about a player and one will be like, oh, he's a lottery pick. And then the other one will be like, he's a second rounder for me. And I'm like, wow. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, this makes me feel better that, sometimes my guys are in different spots than other guys. I've had scouts be like, we had a whole sample size to evaluate his shooting. I think at the combine, I think maybe you can evaluate confidence, mechanics, some stuff like that. But we're going to get, let me pull up his totals here. We have 100 3-point attempts. We have 130 free throw attempts from Dylan Harper to really evaluate what is the jumper. I will mention he's 74% from the line. I've had plenty of people tell me in the actual like NBA and media realm of NBA draft that free throw percentage is not a better, but a very good indicator. But it's a good
indicator, right?
Yes. Yeah. Just in terms of touch and those type of things. So I don't know how much a great shooting combine performance does for Dylan Harper, because I just think at this point you can go back through high school and the film and you have so many numbers with synergy now and all of that to get, okay, well, he had one good, maybe workouts, right? Maybe private workouts is where teams feel better because they put him through their own shooting workouts. And I have heard some of those, like they put a lot of weight into because it's moving and they wear him down and those type of things.
That's interesting. And I think Harper, his game is, like you said, the in-between is so nice. Like he's able to get in and around the basket really well. The mid-range shot, the creation at that level is very fun. So if the 3-point shooting pans out, then it's like, wow, this is a guy who can score on all three levels. And that's very, very intriguing from the guard position. Let's talk about his teammate, Ace Bailey, who I feel like is the most polarizing player in this top of the class. Either you really, really like what he has or you really don't. Why is he that type of player? And I guess, again, favorite fit, where you kind of see him going and what you expect from him.
So listen, I said it at the top. Ace was a guy that I thought could challenge Cooper for the number one pick coming into the year. Because it to me, and I'm not saying they're the same type of players, it was a lesson learned from Brandon Miller. Like, prototypical NBA wings are going to be valued, especially ones that can get buckets. So again, conference play for Ace Bailey, 19 points a game on 46, 39, 73 from the free throw line. And he also rebounds. Like, listen, Ace, the passing is going to be a question. The defense, I think he has potential. And you see some of the defensive playmaking at times. I see communication at times, but it's not always consistent, which he's a young kid. That's going to happen. I think he has potential to be a real two-way player, not 3-and-D. Like, hopefully he's more than that as a scorer, but I do think he has defensive potential. The big questions is, honestly, is the shot diet. It's a little bit of the Jabari Smith Jr. People are going to give the Jabari Smith Jr. comparison of...
That's what you hear all the time.
Yeah. Like, he lives on this really tough shot diet because he can't create his own shot. And in college, he's bigger than guys and longer than guys, and he's scoring over that. Then you get into the NBA, and it's like, he either has to be elite shooter or find a way to get better shots. But now these defenders are longer and better and all of that, all of those things. And so I think that's where the question marks come in with him. I think people are dropping him too low. I think not having him in the top 5 would be tough for me because he is this 6'8", 6'9" wing that we've seen have huge games, like huge scoring outputs, and can really put the ball in the basket along with some of the other
shooter
things.
Too. Like you watch some of his shooting, it's like off movement. He is running into those shots. And that's what's really intriguing as like an off ball player, Yes.
Definitely off ball player. I should have said that at the top. Very much an off ball player for me.
Yeah, I think like one of the intriguing things about Ace, and maybe this is a debate of like what you prefer when it comes to the NBA draft, but you talk about like college spacing, like Ace could really benefit from NBA spacing. Whereas there's the other side of the argument where it's like length and the size and the speed of the NBA might actually hurt his ability. So where do you land on that for Ace? What do you think? Do you think he's actually going to benefit more from the space, or will it be harder for him to create those shots?
I think he'll benefit in terms of the off-ball player, in terms of that space where like somebody breaks down the defense and now he's getting good looks and, all of those type of things. My biggest worry is though, like, I don't know if he has the handle to take advantage of the space on the ball. Yeah. And that's where I think I've come down just a little bit. It's like, I thought Ace May would be, and he still could be, right? Like hub of your offense, like the primary option. He can do it with the ball in his hands. He can do it without the ball in his hands. all of those things. I'm not saying you can't run zoom action for him or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure he has the wiggle and the tightness in his handle to like break you down in isolation and get something better than a mid-range pull-up over a tough
Two different
contest.
types of players. Yeah,
Two different types. Now, can he tighten his handle? We've seen players do it. I'm not like that's the crapshoot with all of this. It's just not as far along as what I thought. Yeah. But he makes NBA level shots when you watch him play. And again, he's a 6'8", 6'9" wing who has real two-way potential that can make shots, that's had big games, that rebounds. Is this not what every single NBA team is looking for, right? Like wings like that. You're always taking a chance when you draft somebody. I think taking a chance on that archetype that has been productive makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So you mentioned that Rutgers is definitely not going to be making that tournament, right?
My gosh,
not in March Madness. So there is an opportunity for someone else to jump into that top three. And you mentioned two names already in Kasparas and VJ, but is there anyone that can really make this a conversation over the next couple of months? And is it one of those two guys?
For the number one pick? Or?
No, for like 2-3. For 2-3. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think Dylan is probably better than Kasparas, but like if he led Illinois through the NCAA tournament, and especially if he cut down, my biggest thing with him right now is his turnovers. Right. Like I watch him a lot, and it's like, listen, I've loved him going back to the summer. Well-built kid. Another, for those who don't know, Kasparas is a primary initiator, not quite as big.
Very unique type of player.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like he kind of like goes at his own pace. It's very interesting to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. But orchestrates the offense, has all the live dribble, hook pass, both hands. But I do have some questions about the turnovers in terms of reading the floor at time, getting himself into trouble, those type of things. The shooting, again, it's funny. In a world where people are complaining about too much three-point shooting, if you follow NBA draft coverage, there seems to be a lot of questions about guys knocking down shots at a high rate. He's at 34% on the season, but had some big games as well. Another guy that I think the defense is okay. I thought the pre-college defense was better than what I've seen in the season. Right. And then the other guy, your guy, VJ Edgecombe, defense is not the concern with VJ. VJ is going to guard.
Especially Taylor, right? Like those guys love to guard. Yeah.
They love to guard. He really loves to do it. You turn on a game and you're going to see like highlight level verticality contests, chase down blocks. Like we talked about low man rotations. VJ does that. He's engaged on the ball. Like there's a chance for him to be a real impact on the defensive end. I'm a little concerned offensively. Okay. Now, he has been better. So you talk about like improvement throughout the year. Yeah. That is something that is true with him. The shooting was bad earlier in the year.
But it's come around recently, right?
Very much come around. He's up to 37% on the season in conference play. And again, I don't want to overstate this, but I do think it matters. Yeah. He's at 17 points on 48, 42 from three, and 88 from the free throw line. I think he's a guy that people would like to see him do a little bit more with the ball in his hands, right? Like some of that stuff. Yeah. But the fact he's knocking down shots along with the defensive potential and all of that has definitely put him back. I think if he showed some more on-ball stuff, some creation, whatever, I could see a team falling in love with VJ over Ace or Dylan. Like I think right now, I would have Dylan 2, Ace 3, Kasparas 4, VJ 5. But if you told me by the time we got to the draft that VJ ends up the number 2 pick with the right team, I wouldn't be shocked. Like it wouldn't be crazy to me.
Right. That's interesting because I think with VJ, similar to Ace in the sense that like maybe NBA spacing could really help him out. Sure. It's like the spacing, opening things up. He's such a great athlete. We already saw it in international competition where it sort of that extra space allowed him to do some more. I don't know. He's very intriguing. He's definitely like one of my favorite guys to watch in this draft cycle. Okay. There are a couple of teams in the draft world right now that are hoping that their teams tank a little bit more to finish this season. I'm thinking about the Brooklyn Nets, think about the Portland Trail Blazers, think about the Toronto Raptors, where everybody is like, all right, let's try to focus on losing for the rest of the season. Now, you can agree or disagree with that approach, but that's how people feel. That's how strongly people feel about that draft. Is there a player, though, in the back end of the lottery or top 10 that you think has that star potential to make these fan bases feel a little bit better about their situation?
So there's some interesting names. What I will say is, I think this draft has gotten a little bit overstated because here's what I've learned the last 2 years. We only talk about drafts in terms of if it's a good draft or a bad draft or whatever, based on the top. That's the only that's how it ends up getting, labeled. My least confident tier is the tier we're about to talk about in this range, where if I was drafting a lot of these guys, maybe some of these guys would end up in the back end of the lottery, but like whoever I'm taking 6 through 10 in the next mock draft, I'm a little nervous about throwing out those names 6 through 10. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Some of those guys, we still got a month to evaluate them, all of that, where you get to the end of the first round and I'm like, okay, I really like this guy into the first round, top of the second, stuff like that. So the rest of the lottery is a little all over the place for me. I will throw out a name. I'm not saying he's my favorite guy, but if you want like star potential, there's 2 names I think that you take swings on. One is Trey Johnson at Texas, who had a huge game last night in an upset win. The dude can get buckets. Yeah. And you talk about like he has a very difficult shot diet at 6'6". And again, it's like, okay, is that a positive S or is that a negative? Like, is there a reason that he's not able to get easier shots for himself and isn't able to get to the rim and finish? And does he have the speed? But he can make shots. Like, I guarantee you that he can make shots. And then it's what's the rest of his game? Completely other side of the spectrum here. Common Malawach, Cooper Flagg's teammate. Yeah. Big man who I thought was going to be like a top 5 pick. Like, he was the guy that I pegged to like, hey, I really hasn't shown all of the things I was excited about. Yeah. But you talk about size, you talk about a big man, potentially spaces the floor eventually, defense, all of those things, movement, mobility. Like, that's another, like, if you just want to get excited about upside and ceiling, those are probably the 2 names in this range compared to some other names that are like, this guy's going to be really, really solid. Like Liam McNeely, I think is going to be a really good pro, but he may not like excite your fan base because he's going to come in and be your leading scorer or something.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, you know what? Kaman is also a guy that from just Raptors people that's someone that's mentioned often because
it makes sense.
They need a big, they need like a big of the future, and so that's why most of the time people are like, "Come on, Malawach, why not?"
Listen. If they're drafting at 7 or something like that, like that's higher than some people have him on their board. But I think that would make sense for them does Toronto need to add what I just said in Liam McNeely, who is one of the best shooters in the draft, does way more than that. Or Con Knippel, another Duke player, or
great name.
Yeah.
Incredible name.
Do they need Jaguar out of BYU, another a guy that needs the ball in his hands but may not be able to shoot? Do they need to add any of those guys?
Right.
No, maybe Toronto is the team that's better off taking Common. And that's where I say, like, I don't love having some of these names at 6, 7, 8 on my board, but when you talk about team specific, it's like, okay, this makes it. Derek Queen is another name that
really intriguing player. Yeah.
Probably my hardest evaluation. I don't know what to think, but it's like, okay, you have this like interesting big who can pass and do these things. All right, send him to Golden State. I love that. Like, let's see, like, let him go there and figure it out and contribute to that. So I think that range in the rest of the lottery is really going to come down to a lot of fit type stuff. Not solely, but I think a lot is like, hey, you know what? We're a team. Liam McNeely makes a lot of sense. Just come in, be really solid, make shots, be a good defender. That's what we can add to our team, and that's what we would value this year.
That just sounds like an OKC pick. That just sounds like a guy that, OKC, Philly is going to end up losing that pick and going to Oklahoma City, and he's going to end up being on the Thunder and a steal. That's how it's going to end up being.
Do they need any more picks?
Like, I don't even know. That's a better question for Andrew Schlecht to answer. But
my thing is, if you're a prospect, do you want to go to OKC? I don't want to go to OKC. I would tell my agent, like, listen, I realize it would look good for me that that Sam Presti drafted me. how do I get in the rotation there?
How do you play?
You know what I'm saying? Like, I was thinking the other day, like, could they draft a guard? And I wrote, like, no, they have Topic sitting on the bench, recovering from injury on top of everybody else. So, no, don't draft me, OKC. I want to go somewhere where I'm going to get a chance to play. And that's obviously a compliment to Schlecht's Oklahoma City Thunder.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, there's actually a few teams in this draft where it's like they have multiple picks. So multiple kicks at the can. Brooklyn is a team that I'm thinking about. Utah is another team. Yeah. Obviously OKC. So the opportunity for moving up and down. We didn't even talk about San Antonio, that if the Hawks lose their pick, they have a potential of getting 2 lottery picks in this draft. So there's that aspect of it too, of like moving up and down and shape shifting, see how it happens throughout the rest of this draft cycle. Bryce Simon, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate you giving us the low on everything the 2025 NBA draft. Folks, check out Bryce, Motor City Hoops at the Pistons Pulse if you want your Pistons coverage. Do great work. Also, co-host of the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini. Talk about all the NBA, everything you could look for. Bryce, thank you so much for coming on, man.
I appreciate it. I enjoyed a chance to talk some NBA draft, so thank you very much.